back to Oakland and tell Huey P. Newton, someone he knew in Oakland, hey, these black folks in Alabama call themselves the Black Panther Party and they carrying guns. And that's where Huey P. Newton got the idea to start the Black Panther Party for self-defense in Oakland. And Huey P. Newton, if you read his autobiography, uh, To Die for the People and Revolutionary Suicide, in both of those books, he talked about that. He wrote Kwame Ture and asked permission. And Kwame Ture, in his autobiography, Ready for the Revolution, he says, yeah, the name belongs to the people. It doesn't belong to, so yeah, go ahead and do it. But these experiences demonstrated to Dr. King that the tactics that he was using would not be enough and that people wanted power. The real struggle wasn't about race, it was about power. And then the election of Kwame Ture, who was Stokely Carmichael at that time, as chair of Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, replacing John Lewis, further radicalized the movement and further had an impact on King. As the call for Black Power, which the picture on the screen illustrates the March Against Fear, which was where the Black Power slogan came out of that march. You wouldn't know the term Black Power if it were not for this march that you see in the picture on the screen. That's where Mukasa Dada, who was Willie Ricks then, was out organizing ahead of the march and came back and told Kwame, drop it now. And Kwame was hesitant to do it. Now, I knew Kwame when he was alive. I know Mukasa to this day. And I know that that's what happened. And I've studied the history. Kwame was hesitant to say it. And finally he said it. We want Black power. We want Black power. And the crowd roared, we want Black power. Before that, the slogan was freedom now. We want Black power. And that radicalized the movement. And Dr. King understood that it was not the same movement anymore. And you could not say the same things anymore. He understood that. The other people, from Roy Wilkins from NAACP, he didn't understand that. Whitney Young from the Urban League, he didn't understand that. But Dr. King understood that he had to evaluate his approach. And he could not stay in the same place in 1966 that he was in 1963. And that's, kind of just thinking about the further radicalizing events in Dr. King's life is as King began to listen to the youth in this movement and the Vietnam War began to gain steam, the students, the youth in SNCC began to push Dr. King farther to the left because there was a common perception within civil rights circles that you can't get involved in anything other than dismantling segregation. The funding will dry up. These corporations that are making money from the Vietnam War, they'll stop contributing. All of this stuff. The youth didn't care about that. They wanted justice. So they pushed Dr. King, and Dr. King was a principled man. He wanted to do what was right, regardless of the consequences. So he was influenced by SNCC to move against the Vietnam War. And the reason why we can say that is because, again, we've studied the history. We know it. And there's even a video series called Eyes on the Prize. And if you watch that in the episode that deals with King's Why I Oppose the War in Vietnam, which was one of his very best speeches, just trash, I Have a Dream, and listen to Why I Oppose the War in Vietnam, which he gave a year to the day before he was assassinated, April 4th, 1967. He gave that speech. And he called Kwame Ture the night before. And the Eyes on the Prize video talks about that. The documentary talks about it. He called Kwame because they've been pushing King for months now. And no civil rights leader, major civil rights leader, had come out against the Vietnam War. And Dr. King told Kwame on the phone, you should come hear my speech before. And Kwame told him, yeah, I've heard you rap a lot. I know what your speeches are. And he said, no, you're going to like this one. I'm going to make my statement against the war in Vietnam. And Kwame was silent on the phone when King said that to him during that phone call. And Kwame was there that next night in the front row of the church when Dr. King made that speech. And this was a severe turning point for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. because unlike most of us, Like you'll run your mouth about what you think, but you don't do any work. So they don't care about that. You just run your mouth and don't do any work. The minute the work gets you bend a fingernail, you're out of it. They don't got to worry about you. But Dr. King was a man of principle. So he did the work to build movement. He had movement. He had people everywhere that he could call upon. People listened to him. He was viewed as the leader in this country on the question of justice and forward human progress. So for him to come out against the Vietnam War represented an opportunity for the left to have a dominant position against the war. He was immediately the most respected spokesperson in the entire country against the Vietnam War when he took that position. And a lot of the elements, that's why you should listen to this speech. A lot of the elements in this speech, obviously, he talked about the Vietnam War not being about stopping communism. It had nothing to do. If it's 2025 and you still believe, well, they went to Vietnam to stop communism, then only thing I can tell you to do is tie some heavy weights to your ankles and jump in the ocean, please. Because you're taking up oxygen that other people who really could be productive could use. Okay, if that's all you think about, that's the best you can do in 20. You've had all these damn years, 60 years to read 2 or 3 sentences that would help you understand that concept doesn't make a bit of sense. And you haven't taken the time to do that, then that's the best I can offer you at this point. So it had nothing to do with communism. It had everything to do with controlling capitalism's grip on the planet Earth. The Vietnamese people had every right to pursue their self-determination. They don't have to ask America for permission for how they can do that. Nobody has to ask this country for anything for how this country doesn't ask anybody for what they want to do. They just do it, whether it's in your interest or not. So King talked about that, and he talked about the reason why the Vietnam War existed was to advance U.S. capitalist interests. And he said that. And this is when, for the first time, seriously, the capitalist power structure began to recognize that they had to move against Martin Luther King. Up to that point, their strategy was to manage Martin Luther King. John F. Kennedy's strategy was to manage King. Lyndon Johnson's strategy was to manage King. At that point, that he came out against the Vietnam War and began to talk more and more about the inequities of the capitalist system, it became clear to them that managing would not be enough. They had to go further. But it's important, again, to underscore King's adherence to principles, because a lot of us are confused, right? And this is another part of the reason why they knew they had to deal with King, because they knew that he could not be compromised. A lot, like, you look at all these coon Negroes on social media out here today. You can tell listening to them that they're saying all that backward ass stuff they're saying because their objective is to get likes and get clout and make money, get a paycheck. That's all that's about. Because anybody with an ounce of sense could argue down their backward ass points in seconds. And they don't even sound like they know what they're talking about when they're articulating all these backward points. So this is not, this is an example of a sellout, a coward, a poop butt. That's what that is. But Dr. King was none of those things. And you cannot make the mistake of confusing King's commitment to nonviolence as cowardice. People can be committed to nonviolence. That doesn't mean they're a coward. Dr. King was no coward. In fact, he was a great example of strength. And I'm not saying I didn't agree with, I don't agree with nonviolence as a principle. I agree with it as a tactic, meaning that if we go out and we have some kind of event, we're nonviolent. We're not going out to attack people. But if you come into our event and try to attack us, I'm going to try to do the best that I possibly can to end your misery for you. So I do agree with it as a tactic, right? We agree with nonviolence as a tactic, but we respect and understand the courage it takes to engage a moralist enemy with nonviolence. And we also know that someone who has a commitment to principles, no matter what, nothing is going to stop them, no matter what the consequences. And I'll give you a quick example. The picture on the screen is during the March Against Fear, because of the murder of the three civil rights workers, Goodman, Swarner, and Cheney, James Cheney, Andrew Goodman, and Swarner, Michael Swarner, they wanted to have uh, a session, a protest in Philadelphia, Mississippi. So they veered from the march, a small group of people, and they went to Philadelphia, Mississippi to have this protest. Now, you can't see it in that picture, but if you study, they were surrounded by violent white supremacists during this picture. And King was talking, that's Floyd McKissick. He was the director of the Congress of Racial Equality, which was, what, along with SNCC, was the militant edge of the civil rights movement. And King got on the mic and King said that the murderers of Goodman, Swarner, and Cheney, I'm sure they're here. And somebody in the audience said, yeah, they're right behind you. I mean, that's the terror that they were facing. A lot of you would have been nowhere near Philadelphia, Mississippi. You wouldn't go there today. So don't call Dr. King a coward. That man was no coward. And he stood there and said, we're not afraid of you. That's what he said right there on those steps to all those crackers. We're not afraid of you. There's nothing you can do to stop us from doing the work that we're doing. And that takes a tremendous amount of courage to do that. That's not no punk, dude. Like, a lot of you, like you punk this, punk that. Look in the mirror if you want to know what a punk looks like. That's not Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. And I'm saying that as someone who never has agreed with a lot of what King stood for. But on this question of principles and courage, there's no question there. The man deserves a mountain of respect. I went to Philadelphia. Shakur and I went to Philadelphia, Mississippi in April of 2014. That's when we went to Memphis to check out the University of Memphis, for her to make the decision about pursuing her master's degree there and her PhD, which she's now done both. And we went there. We stayed there a week, and it was her birthday. And when we're together on her birthday, she knows she gets present. But one of the things she has to do is we have to acknowledge those that came before us, because that's what we do on our birthdays. We don't have all this self-indulgence like so many people. We it's a day of service for us. That's African culture, y'all. It's a day. It's not about you. You didn't have anything to do with yourself coming into the world. So why are we celebrating you? It's about you celebrate the community that brought your ass into the world. That's what it should be about. That's what it's about for us. So that was a requirement for her growing up. So I told her, she said, well, what do you want to do, Daddy? I said, I want to drive the March Against Fear. So we did. And we veered like these Africans here into Philadelphia, Mississippi. This was in 2014, 50 years after these events. And the town is 6,000 people. It's a small Mississippi town. There's very few Africans there, which, Mississippi has the highest percentage of African people of any state in the U.S. And so it was odd to come to a town where there were no Africans. Why? Because they've driven us all out of the town. And Shakur and I were there. I had on a Black Panther Party shirt and a ball cap that said African. She had on an African dress. And we were not traveling alone, in case you confused about who the hell we are. We were prepared for whatever came our way. And we walked in this, people were staring at us, walking down Main Street. It's literally called Main Street. And people were taking pictures of us on the street. We were laughing, and we walked in this restaurant, and there was this old cracker. It looked like he was about 375 years old, leaning on the door. It was a soul food restaurant. I guess he owned it or whatever. And there was a young African woman that was a server, and we were in there laughing. Everybody was quiet. It was all tense in there, and we were laughing. We were laughing at the backward ass music they were playing in there. We were laughing at how old everything. We were laughing out loud, just being ourselves. And when that old 400-year cracker went wherever he went, the young African girl came out And she came to us, she said, y'all ain't from here. And we were like, no, we're not from here. And we're thinking it's the same thing. So Shakur said, I'm getting ready to move here. She's thinking about Memphis. And the look of fear in this young woman's face, she said, you don't want to live here. That's just how she said it. And she said, where y'all from? We said, we out of California. She's like, I knew it. And we were like, you should come to California. And I said, everybody's looking at us. I said, this is where the Black Panther Party's from. We stand up and fight. We don't we don't do that. So she went on and served us and left. But I'm telling you, and then we stopped at a plantation house on Main Street in Philadelphia, Mississippi. And we were taking pictures on there. I still have the picture. And the European woman came out, may I help you? This is my land, may I help you? I said, yeah, we're trying to see if you owe us money. And she stopped and lady turned around and went back in the house. I mean, you know, this is the if Dr. King and these Africans could face what they faced, that little story I just told you, that's nothing. That's nothing there. That's nothing at all. Because we aren't even operating on nonviolence. Some people would have tried to create a problem for us, it would have been another incident in Philadelphia, Mississippi. But the point is, this is what capitalist system understood about Dr. Martin Luther King. He could not be compromised. He could not be intimidated. He could not be frightened away from the work. He would not sell out his mission. And he was, because of these principles, had built a movement. People would follow him. And they knew that. And the problem with the capitalist system is they're so stupid, they think that if they kill one person, they kill the movement. They don't understand Fred Hampton's statement about you can kill the revolutionary, but you can't kill the revolution. They still don't understand that. But this is why they knew they had to get rid of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So let's talk about the state and Martin Luther King. Let's talk about some of the things that they were doing to Dr. King, right? Again, the fundamental difference between you and me out here talking, running our mouths, and someone like Dr. King is that he was courageous enough to build a social movement. So when he talked for hundreds of thousands of people, not just himself. That's where the power is, you all. That's why we don't have any. That's why it's in one ear and out the other when you're telling us vote for this cracker, vote for that graham cracker, vote for that woman graham cracker. That's why it's in one ear and out the other, because there's no power in that. And we know that. No power whatsoever. And all of them are basically different sides of the same coin in terms of power for us as a people. I'm not talking about crumbs. I'm talking about power. I'm not talking about this back and forth shell game. I'm talking about power. So he had that social movement. That's how we force the capitalist system to respect our leverage, because only the masses make history. No one politician, I don't care how great they are, no one person. We've said the story many times. In the Montgomery bus boycott, the first meeting in 1955 in Montgomery, Alabama, Dr. King was sitting in the last row. There are reports that he was eating a sandwich when C.V. Vivian, the pastor, nominated King to be president of the Montgomery Boycott Association. And Dr. King, again, being a person of principle, accepted the nomination. But if he had gotten diarrhea and left or whatever, indigestion or allergies, or just decided, man, this meeting's boring, I'm going to go step outside and have a smoke or whatever, they would have nominated Dr. Jones or Dr. Smith or Dr. Williams. It doesn't matter. And you would know Dr. Jones or Dr. Smith and Dr. Williams. You wouldn't even know Dr. King. And he'd probably still be alive, sold out like Dr. Williams and Dr. Smith were or are. So the difference is the masses make history. And this is what made King dangerous, because he was understanding clearly he was a conduit for the masses of the people, especially after King began to shift beyond just racial reform to challenging the capitalist system. That's when they amped up their attacks against him. And this is how the state does it. Their strategy is always the same. This is how they sabotage us. First, they try to sabotage your work, turn people against your work, discredit your work. You can see them doing that now. Well, these protests won't accomplish anything. These people don't have jobs. They're just lazy. Those are efforts to sabotage. All of you have heard those talking points because they make sure you've heard them. All of these are efforts to sabotage the work. If that doesn't work, then they attempt to discredit you. And that happened with Dr. King. The picture there, he's leaving the FBI offices. He had a meeting with J. Edgar Hoover, who was a longtime director for the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI. And in that meeting, that cracker Hoover told Dr. King that they had compiled tapes, audio tapes of Dr. King having sexual relations with a number of women, and that they were going to turn those tapes, that packet of tapes, over to Coretta Scott King, Dr. King's wife, and to media outlets to attempt to discredit Dr. King. And the only way they would not do that is if Dr. King swore to abandon his work. That's what this cracker told him in 1967. And Dr. King told, by all reports, told that cracker, do whatever you need to do. I'll just deal with whatever happens. And the crackers did that. They sent the file to Rolling Stone, and Rolling Stone magazine, to their credit, they refused to publish it. They never did publish it. They sent the packet to Coretta Scott King. And I have complete respect for Coretta Scott King, because how could you imagine receiving a packet like that? And she was able to place the work. I'm not saying Martin Luther King was right. I don't think he was right what he was doing with the women. But my point is that his wife, Coretta Scott King, had the maturity to recognize that it was bigger than just her and Martin. And for her to make an issue of that would affect millions of African people. So she decided to take the hit, and she deserves credit for that. Most of you wouldn't have been able to do it. You'd have been all on social media, dogging out Martin Luther King, totally destroying the movement for your ego. You wouldn't have been able to do that. But she did do that. She never talked about it. She lived decades after Martin Luther King and never said a word about any of that to anybody. And we know it happened. So we have to respect that. And the packet ended up being sealed. The legislature voted to have it sealed. And when Ronald Reagan, when that old cracker was president in the 80s, when the holiday for Dr. King, because of mass protests, of which I was involved, it was some of the first protests I was ever engaged in, the late 70s and early 80s. That's how I got my real introduction to social justice work, around the Martin Luther King holiday, to push to have. A lot of you've had it forever, so you thought it was always there. No, it was a push. There were people arrested. There were people beat. We got into skirmishes with police officers here around the Martin Luther King holiday. That's how every change that happens is a struggle. And when that was going on, Reagan wanted to open the packet to reveal the tapes in an effort to discredit Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, who would have more credibility today in the gas that he passed than Ronald Reagan could ever have in his whole goddamn life. But that's their strategy, right? Is to discredit you. And then if they cannot discredit you, the third step they take is to eliminate you, is to assassinate you. That's what they do. And that's how they went with Dr. King. That's the trajectory that they went. So what is the aftermath of that? Once again, they realized that Dr. King didn't have a price. They couldn't buy him out. If it was a lot of you all, like a lot of you Negroes today, well, I want some reparations. All they got to do is offer you some money, and you'll sell out 500 years of our people struggling for justice. I mean, reparations is only, to me, the only time when I hear it, I don't even listen to that, because I know the people talking about it are just talking about a paycheck for themselves. The only time I'm gonna listen to any discussion about reparations is when it centers Africa, because that's where the damage was done. You know, we're over here, that weakened Africa. because we were stolen from Africa. Anybody that reduces 500 years of Africa being under attack to me getting a 5, 10, $50,000 check, I mean, that's just human disgrace. That's all it is. So you got a price. All they got to do is give you enough money and you'll sell out. And a lot of us are so stupid. I mean, I'm sorry, that's just the truth, that these crackers will eventually, if they push hard enough, they'll give you some money because they got money. All right, they ain't giving you no land. They ain't giving you nothing where you could develop any power, but they'll give you money because they know the majority of you will turn around and give it right back to them. They'll have uh, reparations rims sale where you don't even got to have your reparations check yet. You can go to the tire place and get your rims, and then you sign over the reparations check directly to hit to them. They'll have reparation jewelry stores where you come in and get your jewelry and sign your reparations check right over to them. They'll have, and a lot of us will be doing that. And then when you sign the what is it, the endorsement on the back of the goddamn check, as soon as you sign it, it'll have a little statement. You can't talk about racism ever again. So the next time after you sign it, and then you done blowing the money, and you ain't got nothing, and then you be like, yeah, it's racist. No, you can't say that. That's we gave you the money. What you coons want? Now you still, this is what that's okay with a lot of you. That's not okay with those of us who are serious about making change. That's not okay. In fact, to us, you're the worst kind of human being. Selling out our ancestors' history. They could not do that to the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He didn't have a price like a lot of you. So because he didn't have a price, that's why they plotted to assassinate him. That's why a lot of you run around here talking about, well, they wouldn't kill me. No, they don't need to kill you. You do enough to damage our people just the way you function every day. Why would they kill you? They're one of their best assets. They love you. They want to continue to have you out here doing that. They'll give you support. If you went to them and said, you know what? I heard, y'all, I ain't got no money. Well, we'll give you some money. Just keep doing what you're doing. Well, don't you want to know what we're doing? We already know. You're doing a great job for us. Just send your expenses in and we'll send you a check. That's where a lot of us stand today. But that's why they plotted for King's assassination. And if you don't know the details of the assassination, there are a number of books that talk about that. There are a number of books. But what I will say about it is that if you think James Earl Ray assassinated Martin Luther King, like I don't have any, I can't, I have no words for you. I mean, clearly, if you spend an hour seriously studying it, you know that could not be how Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated. There's several things that happened. The trees that block the view to the balcony at the Lorraine Hotel, where the assassin would have had to shoot through, were cut down the day before Dr. King was assassinated. I mean, I can go on and on because we have studied it. It was a collaboration between the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the U.S. military. That's why, y'all, the military, they're a bunch of terrorists, mercenaries. That's what they are. I don't care who. I don't care if it's your mama, your daddy, you, mercenaries. That's all it is. And that's who assassinated Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And what they didn't plan for was over 300 cities in this backward country went up in flames in response to them killing Dr. King. And that's why they scrambled to create affirmative action or diversity, equity, and inclusion. Again, those of you that say, well, why are they burning down their own neighborhoods and you got a job you wouldn't have had if it wasn't for them burning down their neighborhoods? Stop talking so damn stupid. Everything is dialectical. And they didn't want to see this country burn to the ground in ashes. So they began, we got to get some Negroes in college. We got to create a buffer class. We got to create some Negroes that are going to speak for us and protect this and defend this system. And they did that. And all you got to do is go on social media today and you can see all these Negroes defending and protecting their system. Goal accomplished for them. Goal accomplished. And the whole point of that whole affirmative action DEI process was to undermine independent militant struggle. And it certainly has in this country. At the Dr. King Day in January, brother come up to me with a entrepreneur flyer with Dr. King's face on. I'm like, what does that have to do with Dr. King? Well, that's what we need, brother. I'm like, no, that's what you need because you're trying. He's on there like he's doing classes. You pay him, and he'll teach you how to be an entrepreneur. If he's such a great entrepreneur, he would be able to give you the classes free, and he could because he's making so much money being an entrepreneur. Why does he have to charge for the classes? Because that's where he makes his money, you all. That off of you telling you to do something that he hasn't even done. All he's done is organize you to pay him. That has nothing to do with Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Nothing at all. So this is what we have to understand, but it's okay because all they did with everything they did, assassinating Dr. King, is they certainly put nonviolence to death. They will never get our youth to fall for nonviolence as a principle again. Those days are over. Try to go to our youth, commit acts of violence against our young people, and then talk to them about the nonviolent spirit and see what happens to you. Those days are gone. You effectively destroyed that. And that makes the potential riper for us to engage in revolutionary training and organization. And guess what? That is exactly what we are doing and will continue to do. And we just want to thank you for joining us today. We invite you back next week. Shakur is committed to be here. Hopefully, nothing else happens. We have had a couple of weeks, y'all. Multiple deaths in the family. Um, her working for her illnesses, just all kind of problems. But none of that will sway us. We're still here. We're still rocking. We're still going to engage this struggle. So join us next week. We're going to talk about becoming a doctor and class suicide. Shakur is going to be talking about the importance of education and using the education to advance the masses of our people. Go to the QR code in the upper left-hand corner, the red and white one. Go to AAP, or you can scan it, or scan it, and you can get other AAPRP programs, of course. The Forward Ever Shop, where you can buy clothes that are talking about the our struggle for liberation, Hood Communist, Revolutionary Pan-African blog. Check that out. And then we want to ask you to put on your calendar African Liberation Day, May 25th. We'll have commemorations everywhere. We'll have an international webcast that you can watch from the comfort of your own domicile, but we also have events all over the place that you can physically go to. And the link below the African Liberation Day flyer, please donate for African Liberation Day. I'll make a QR code for next week for that. But we want to invite you to donate money. We use the money you donate to finance our African Liberation Days around the world. I'm sorry, in Africa, right? The one, like I'm working with our people here in Northern California, in Southern California, Oregon, uh, Arizona, New Mexico, and the African Liberation Day in this region is in Oakland, which is about an hour from where I am, and we just fund that out of our pockets. But whatever you donate here goes to our African Liberation Day commemorations in Africa. Okay, and then join the AAPRP there, AAPRP-intl.org. You can watch a video, get more information, support the bottom right hand QR code. Burkina Books is a project of the AAPRP on the ground in Burkina Faso. So become a sponsor there, sponsor whatever amount you can. It's all helps. Even $10 a month is helpful. So please do that. And we want to, again, invite you, please, to, purchase my book. Unfortunately, you can only do it through Amazon. We use the enemy's tools to organize against them. If somebody bought a Tesla and they were using the Tesla to organize events, to move supplies, to move people from event to event, would that be a problem? Of course not. Of course not. That helps the struggle. So, 50 years from now, nobody's going to remember, well, that event happened because he drove there in a Tesla. That's not going to be important. The importance is that, well, that event, that's how I learned and understood how to do this. This is how this developed that level of work. So nobody's going to remember that I had to use Amazon to publish this book because none of the other publishers would do it. So buy the book, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. Buy it. Start a study group around the book. It's a great organizing book, if I do say so myself, but you don't have to take my word for it. A bunch of people have written reviews about it. You can go online and see them for yourself if you don't believe me. So check that out. All the proceeds from the book go towards anti-fascist work that is happening every week here now. We're getting ready to start classes in the community. So whatever help you can give, buying this book contributes to that. We appreciate you. Thank you for joining us today. Come back next week. Tell a friend, tell an enemy. Forward ever, backwards never. Have a good rest of your day.